The wind howled outside. Snow fell like ashes from the dark sky. In the mountains of the alien planet Zareth 4, most creatures were asleep, hiding from the cold that could freeze bones in minutes. But Darren, a human man, was still awake. His wooden cabin stood alone between sharp cliffs and icy trees. A fire crackled inside. He sat by it, sharpening a tool, sipping hot broth. Life here was quiet, hard, but peaceful. Just how he liked it. Until, knock, knock, knock. Darren froze. No one ever came here. He stood up slowly, set his cup down, and reached for the small plasma blade he kept near the door. Another knock. Softer, slower. He opened the door carefully, and his breath caught. A tall alien woman stood there, her body shaking. Snow clung to her long silver hair. Her skin was a pale blue, glowing faintly in the night. In her arms she held a small child wrapped in torn cloth. The child didn't move. The woman fell to her knees. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely there. "Take me as your concubine. I will serve you. Just protect my daughter." Darren's heart thumped. A concubine. He looked closer. The woman was noble. That was clear. Her eyes held pride, even in fear. The girl in her arms looked barely 5, and her lips were turning blue from the cold. Darren stepped aside. "Get in. Now." He closed the door behind them and led the woman near the fire. She didn't speak again, just laid the child down gently and knelt beside her, rubbing her small hands. Darren brought blankets. He opened a metal box and pulled out emergency heat pads. He placed them under the girl's arms, one on her chest. The child coughed. A weak sound, but it meant she was alive. The woman let out a breath. She looked at Darren with eyes full of something too heavy to name. "Who are you?" Darren asked, kneeling beside her. "My name," she began, then paused, "is Virel. I was a princess once." Darren blinked. "Princess?" She nodded slowly. "The Lixarian Empire. It has fallen. I escaped. My daughter Lieri is the last of royal blood." Darren looked at the little girl, who was now breathing a little better, cheeks slowly warming. "And you thought I'd want a concubine?" he asked, confused. Virel's eyes stayed on the fire. "Men want many things. I have nothing left to offer except myself. But she is innocent. She deserves to live." Darren stood and walked toward the small kitchen. He poured warm broth into 2 cups. "Here," he said, handing one to her. "You don't owe me anything." Virel stared at him for a long moment. "Then why help us?" He shrugged. "I don't like seeing kids freeze to death." The night passed slowly. Virel sat awake watching her daughter. Darren watched her. She moved with grace, even in pain. She touched the child's head gently. Every few minutes she whispered soft words in a language Darren didn't know. At dawn, the snow began to slow. Light touched the mountains, making the world look silver and cold. The girl stirred. "Mama," she whispered. Virel smiled. "Yes, my star. We are safe." Lieri's eyes opened and landed on Darren. She blinked. "Who's that?" Virel answered. "A kind man." The child looked at him. "Are you our new papa?" Darren choked on his drink. "What?" Virel looked away, embarrassed. She doesn't understand. She's confused. But Darren wasn't angry. He sat beside the girl and smiled. "Just a friend," he said. "For now." Outside, far away in the city lights, a different kind of fire was burning. A bounty hunter received a message. Target confirmed. The ex-princess is alive. Reward, 500,000 units, dead or alive. He loaded his gun, checked his map, and set his eyes on the mountain. The morning sun melted the outer layer of snow, but inside Darren's cabin the warmth had already returned. Virel stood by the window. Her long hair was brushed now, tied loosely behind her back. Her royal bearing still showed, even in a plain robe borrowed from Darren. She watched little Lieri sleep on the couch near the fire, tucked under thick blankets. Darren entered from the back room with a tray, warm stew, a small fruit, and a fresh piece of bread. You didn't have to, she said quietly. I know, Darren replied, but you didn't have to knock on my door either. She looked at him then, really looked. His eyes were steady, his voice calm. He hadn't touched her without consent. He hadn't asked for anything in return. This was new. After breakfast, Varel finally spoke the full truth. I was next in line to rule the Lixarian Empire. Darren raised an eyebrow. I thought. Lixarians didn't allow women to rule. Varel gave a sad smile. They didn't, until my father changed the law. He called me the Fierce Light, but his brother, the Duke, called it heresy. There was a coup. My guards were bribed. My palace was burned. They killed my husband first. She paused, her voice hardening. Then they came for my daughter. I ran. Darren felt a chill, not from the weather. How long have you been on the run? 4 weeks. I burned my crest. I sold my jewels for food. I crossed the black marshes and hid inside supply ships. I burned my own robes just to keep her warm. Her hands trembled as she whispered, and last night I almost failed. Darren leaned forward. You didn't fail. I came to your door offering myself as a slave. You came begging for your child's life. That's not weakness, that's love. Varel looked down. Her fingers clutched the edge of her robe. I don't know how to live like this. You don't have to, Darren said. You're safe here. But outside, trouble was already moving. 3 bounty hunters received a location ping. The last signal from Varel's tracking crest, before she had crushed it, led to these mountains. The tallest one, a red-scaled alien named Rorg, smirked. She's desperate. Desperate people always leave footprints. They moved silently toward the forest trail, weapons ready, scanners blinking green. Back at the cabin, Leary had woken up and was now playing with wooden blocks Darren had carved long ago. She smiled as she arranged them into a tower. Mama, look. Varel turned and gasped quietly. For the first time in days, Leary wasn't coughing. Her skin had color again. She likes you, Varel said almost in a whisper. I like her too, Darren replied. Children don't lie. They see things as they are. There was a long silence between them. I should leave, Varel said, suddenly. I bring danger here. Darren stood. I've lived in this cabin for 6 years. I know every inch of this forest. You're safer here than out there. She stepped forward. But why do this? Why help me when my own kind would sell? Me for coins? Darren's answer was simple. Because I'm human and we don't leave mothers and children to die in the snow. At that moment, Leary suddenly looked up. Something's outside, she whispered. Varel's head snapped around. She has keen senses, like her father. Darren grabbed his rifle and walked to the window. In the distance, barely visible between the trees, a shadow moved. His voice dropped low. They've found you. Varel went still. We have to go. No, Darren interrupted. They'll expect you to run. He walked to a hidden hatch near the fireplace, lifted it, a tunnel, built it for escape. But this time, I'll use it for defense. As Darren armed the cabin with traps and barriers, Varel placed a gentle kiss on her daughter's forehead. Stay quiet, my star, she whispered, and stay brave. Then she stood, pulled on one of Darren's old coats and picked up a blade from his wall. He glanced at her. You know how to use that? She gave a small, dangerous smile. I was trained to command armies, Darren. Before I was a princess, I was a warrior. The snowstorm had passed, but the cold tension inside the cabin remained. Darren checked each trap outside one by one, pressure wires, camo sensors, buried shock pads. His old military training was finally useful for something more than farming. Tools. Inside, Princess Varel carefully braided her daughter's hair while the little girl sat calmly by the fire. Her hands no longer trembled from cold. Leary suddenly asked, Mama, is the kind man going to be my new papa? Varel paused, then smiled gently. He is our protector, little star. Nothing more. but even she didn't believe her own words. Darren returned to find Leary sitting in his large chair swinging her feet. She gave him a wide smile. "Hello, Mr. Darren. I built you a new tower." He looked down. The wooden blocks he had carved years ago, bored during long winters, were now stacked in a spiral. He crouched beside her. "That's some fine building, Leary." She grinned. "Mama says I get it from my papa. He was a builder, too." Virel didn't speak. Her face turned away toward the fire. Darren studied the little girl. Small horns poked gently from her silver hair, and her lavender eyes shimmered like her mother's. "Want to help me outside?" he asked her suddenly. Virel turned in alarm. "It's not safe. I won't let her go far. I'll show her how we track footprints. Might be useful." She hesitated, then nodded. Leary bundled up and walked outside with Darren. She watched as he pointed to deep footprints in the snow. "See that? Wide heel, clawed front. That's not mine." She blinked. "A hunter?" "Exactly." They followed the trail a little deeper before Darren stopped. Suddenly, he dropped to a knee. "What is that?" she asked. He picked up something small, an old signal chip blinking faintly. "That's how they tracked you," he said. Leary's face fell. "Mama said she destroyed everything." "She did," he said. "But these things hide deep in clothes, or skin. It's not her fault." She looked up. "You're going to protect us, right?" Darren didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Yes, I will. As long as I breathe." Later that evening, Leary fell asleep in his arms. Virel stood at the kitchen, counter-staring. "You didn't have to carry her," she said softly. "She asked me to," he replied. She moved closer. Her voice dropped low. "She trusts you, more than anyone since her father died." Darren placed the child on the couch gently and turned. "She's brave, just like her mother." There was silence between them. "I never wanted to say those words," Virel whispered. "That I had no empire, no family, no honor, only my body to offer." Darren stepped closer. "You didn't offer weakness. You offered sacrifice." She looked up at him, and for a brief moment something passed between them. Not fear, not royalty, just human. That night, the scanners Darren placed around the cabin lit up red. Movement. 3 life forms, moving fast. Darren rose from the floor and armed his rifle. He looked to Virel. Time to use that warrior blood. She grabbed her blade and nodded once. He turned to Leary. "Stay under the floorboards. Don't come out unless I say." Leary whispered, "Be careful, Mr. Darren." He gave her a wink. "Always." Outside, 3 bounty hunters closed in. Their suits were armored, and their weapons glowed. The leader, Rorg, scanned the structure. Thermal signs confirmed 3 bodies inside, 1 adult male, 1 adult female, 1 juvenile. The second hunter grinned. "Princess and Brad are worth double alive. Man." Rorg snorted. "Kill him. He's just extra meat." But as they took a step forward, boom! 1 trap exploded under their feet, sending the smallest hunter flying into a tree. Electric wires shot out of the ground, wrapping around the second one's boots, zapping his armor. Rorg growled and opened fire blindly, but Darren was all ready. On the roof. Bang, bang! His rifle echoed in the forest, shattering the silence. Virel leapt from the doorway, slashing low. Her blade hit true, cutting into armor. Back inside, Leary peeked through the floor crack. Her tiny body trembled. But then she saw something that made her eyes go wide. Darren wasn't just helping them. He was fighting for them, and not like a stranger, but like someone who belonged, like a protector, like a father. The night was no longer quiet. Smoke curled from the tree line. 2 bounty hunters lay unconscious, tangled in Darren's traps. The third, Rorg, the red-scaled brute, had escaped into the forest limping, blood dripping down his side. Inside the cabin, Darren slammed the door shut. That won't be the end of it. Virel wiped her blade, her breath heavy. He'll return with more. Maybe even a whole squad next time. Darren nodded. Which means we have two choices, stay and die, or vanish. From under the floor, Leary poked her head. Out. I don't want to run anymore. Virel lifted her gently, holding her close. You shouldn't have to, Darren said, but you're not alone anymore. The next morning they moved. Darren packed supplies, dried food, thermal blankets, his strongest tools, a pulse rifle, and a snowboard sled to carry Leary if her legs grew tired. Where are we going? Virel asked. To the North Caves. Darren replied. There's an old mine shaft there. If we make it that far, we can ride the cargo tunnels out of this region. Is it safe? No, but it's smarter than waiting for death at the door. They traveled through thick snow between frozen trees across icy ridges. Leary sat on the sled, bundled in a fur coat 3 times her size, smiling at the ride. Virel walked beside Darren in silence for a while. Then she asked softly, Have you ever had a family? He shook his head. War took that away a long time ago. Since then, it's just been me and the mountain. She looked away, thinking. You could have stayed in the cities. They didn't feel like home. Do we? Darren stopped walking. Looked at her. You do now. Virel lowered her eyes quickly. She didn't respond. But her heart beat faster. But deep in the snow valley behind them, Rorg wasn't done. He dragged his broken leg through the woods until he reached his ship. With shaking hands, he activated the distress beacon. Target found. Repeat. Lixarian Princess is alive. Requesting backup and payment unit. Location locked. And somewhere far away, someone very powerful received his message. The trio reached a narrow path between ice cliffs. The air grew thinner. Leary's lips turned pale again. We need shelter, Darren said. There's a cave ahead. Virel pointed. I passed it once while running. It's narrow but warm inside. They reached it by dusk. Inside, they lit a small fire. Leary slept quickly, curled up beside her mother. Darren sat nearby, his rifle resting across his lap. Virel approached him slowly. You're risking your life for people you barely know. I'm not saving strangers anymore, Darren replied. You and Leary, you're mine to protect now. Virel's voice was soft. Even if I never become what I offered at your door? Darren looked at her. You already became something better. Outside, a new threat arrived. Hunter-class dropcrafts descended from the sky, fast, silent, lethal. Inside them were elite. Trackers paid not to take prisoners. Rorg, barely breathing, smiled as they approached. She's with a human, strong, smart, and dangerous. Kill him first. The leader of the squad, an icy-eyed female alien, nodded. The princess will return home or return in pieces. Back in the cave, Virel leaned closer to the fire, watching Darren. You know, she said. I once had everything, jewels, dresses, 10 servants brushing my hair. And now? Darren asked. She reached across the fire and touched his hand. Now, I have a man who would die for my daughter. For Darren, there were no words left, just a nod, a look, a silent promise. The wind howled again that night, but it wasn't just snow. It was the storm of war, and it was closing in. The sky was no longer quiet. In the early morning light, Darren noticed a strange shimmer far above the mountains. It was not a star. It moved too fast, reflected too sharply. Scout drone, he muttered, tightening his grip on the rifle. Inside the cave, Virel was wrapping Leary in extra furs. The child slept peacefully, unaware of the danger falling from the sky. Darren stepped in. They found us. Virel froze. How much time? Not long. We have to move. Now. They rushed from the cave into the icy wind, using a shortcut. Virel remembered. An old stream bed frozen solid. It cut through the cliffs and led straight to the edge of the northern mines. Darren pulled the sled. Virel ran beside him, eyes constantly scanning the ridge above. Leary sat curled under blankets, holding onto a wooden toy Darren had carved just days ago. She didn't speak, but her eyes watched everything. Suddenly, boom! A sharp sound cracked. Through the trees, snow exploded near them. Laser fire! They're here! Darren shouted, yanking the sled into cover behind a fallen log. Above them, 3 elite alien hunters leapt from a drop craft, landing with mechanical grace. Their suits shimmered with active camouflage. Their weapons pulsed red. Hand over the child and the fugitive princess. One barked in a cold, metallic voice. Human interference will be punished. Darren stepped out from cover slowly, hands raised, but not empty. His hidden pulse pistol fired first, right into the speakers. Helmet crack, sparks flew. The hunter dropped. Run! He shouted to Varel. She didn't hesitate. Grabbing the sled's rope, she pulled Leary and darted toward the tree line. But the second hunter turned and aimed, only to be slammed sideways by a falling tree, rigged by Darren the night before. He had expected pursuit. He had prepared for, and Varel ran harder than she ever had in her life. Behind her, laser bolts burned holes through the snow. She pulled the sled with pure will. Leary cried out as they bounced over rough ice. Then, suddenly, Varel slipped. Her foot hit a patch of frost. She fell hard, the sled tipped. Leary tumbled out, rolling in the snow. The third hunter closed in, raising his blade. Leary screamed, "No!" Darren came crashing from the trees. He hit the hunter like a falling boulder, slamming him into the ground. They rolled together, fists flying, ice cracking beneath them. The hunter was stronger, taller, armored, but Darren was faster and angry. He slammed a metal spike into the hunter's side. Hiss! Acid sprayed as the armor cracked. The hunter howled. Darren grabbed his dropped blade and drove it home. The snow turned red. Varel pulled Leary close. "You're safe, little star. You're safe now." But the child was shaking. I thought he was going to take me away again. Darren walked over, bloody and limping. "No one's ever taking you again," he said. "Not while I live." Varel looked up at him, his face bruised, eyes wild, blood on his arms. But to her he looked like a king. And for the first time since her empire fell, she felt safe. They reached the edge of the mine by sunset. Old metal doors sealed the entrance. Darren hacked the controls and forced it open. Inside, tunnels. Deep, long, forgotten. He led them down into the dark, lighting the way with a lantern. The wind disappeared. The cold faded. Here, underground, they would have a chance. But even in the safety of the dark, Varel whispered, "They won't stop." "I know," Darren replied. "Then we keep running?" He looked down at Leary, who had fallen asleep again in her arms. "No," he said. "We stop running, and we start planning." Silence. Not the peaceful kind. The kind that echoes in old tunnels, bouncing off rusted metal and ancient stone. Darren, Varel, and Leary walked deeper into the abandoned mine shaft. The path was uneven. Their boots made soft thuds on the ground. Dust filled the air like a ghost that never left. "I used to play in tunnels like this," Varel whispered, brushing her fingers along the old wall. "Back before the war." "You had tunnels in a palace?" Darren asked. She smiled faintly. "I had a lot of things before the palace fell." They stopped in a large chamber lit by Darren's lanterns. Machinery from a forgotten age rested in the corners. Broken pipes. Bent tracks. Half-covered crates. "This will be our shelter," Darren said. "At least for now." Leary yawned and curled up on a thick blanket made from cabin furs. Darren handed Varel a steaming cup of broth. Made from dried root and glacier moss. Not tasty but warm. She took it, holding it close. "You live like this all the time?" "I did. Until you both came." Varel sat beside him. "Why did you help us?" He didn't answer right away. Then, "Because I saw her eyes. Leary's. Same as a girl I couldn't save in the war." Varel's eyes softened. "You lost someone. She died in my arms. I swore. Next time I wouldn't fail." She gently touched his hand. "You didn't." Suddenly, Clank, a sound echoed from deeper in the mine. Darren jumped up, weapon ready. Varel followed, her hand on the hilt of her curved dagger. "Stay with her," Darren said, motioning to the sleeping child. "No," she replied firmly. "I'm not royalty anymore. I fight beside you." He didn't argue. They followed the echo, deeper and deeper, until they came to a collapsed tunnel. A strange glow came from beneath the rubble. Varel crouched. "This is not natural." Darren moved closer. "There's a power source, buried under the rocks." Together they cleared some of the debris and found something shocking. A stasis pod. Still active, still pulsing. Inside was a figure, alien, female, scarred, yet regal. Varel gasped. "That's my mother's bodyguard, Commander Seal, Darren. Check the panel. Life signs weak, she's been trapped for years." He looked at Varel. "Should we wake her?" "She was loyal. If she's still alive, she'll protect us." Darren pressed the panel. Steam hissed. The pod opened slowly. The woman inside coughed, eyes fluttering open. Her voice cracked. "Princess?" Varel fell to her knees. "You're alive." Seal touched her face with a trembling hand. "The palace burned, but you survived. And now we need you again." The old warrior sat up slowly, her silver armor rusted but still proud. "Then I fight again. For you. For her." She looked at the sleeping Leary. Back at the camp, Darren worked quickly. "We need more weapons," he said. "I know where some are," Seal rasped, "hidden by royal guards in the ice tunnels." Varel smiled for the first time that day. "We're not just survivors anymore," she said. "We're becoming something stronger." Darren lit the last lantern. "Then let's give them a reason to fear us." Above ground, new dropships arrived. Not just bounty hunters now, but full retrieval squads from the Lixarian Empire. 10 ships, 50 soldiers, heat scanners, wall breakers, armored drones. They would not stop until the princess was returned, but what they didn't know was that the hunted were becoming the hunters. The mine tunnels were no longer silent. They pulsed with quiet energy, old lights flickering to life one by one. Darren had reconnected parts of the generator system. The cold darkness was now a glowing path through steel and stone. At the center of it all stood Varel, no longer just a refugee, no longer only a mother. She wore armor Seal had repaired from the ruins. It didn't shine like royal metal, but it was strong, worn, real. Beside her stood Commander Sale, awake and armed. And just beyond the last lantern stood Darren, loading his rifle, placing explosives, setting traps. Outside, snow fell again, but this time, it brought fire with it. 10 dropships, 50 soldiers. They landed without warning. Boots hit the snow. Commanders barked orders. Capture the princess, take the child, kill the human. Inside the tunnels, Varel looked down at her daughter. Leary was awake now, scared but silent. "Will they hurt you again, Mama?" she whispered. Varel knelt beside her. "They'll try, but they will not succeed." Then she kissed her forehead. "You are the last piece of our name, and I will not let you be taken." The first wave of soldiers entered the mine. Loud, careless, and met their first surprise, a gas trap rigged by Darren. Boom! Screams echoed. 2 soldiers dropped. The second wave moved slower, scanning carefully, but Sale was waiting. She dropped from the ceiling like a shadow, her plasma blade slicing through armor. Varel, blade in hand, fought beside her. They were outnumbered, but not outmatched. Darren, firing from cover, shouted, "Now, Princess!" Varel didn't hesitate. She grabbed the main detonation line and pulled it. The side of the mine exploded. Snow and rock collapsed onto half the invaders. The squad leader growled through his radio. "Retreat. Regroup at surface. Bring in the flame drones." Darren heard it. "They're planning to torch the tunnels." Varel stood up, breathing hard. "Then we don't give them the chance." She turned to Sale. "Take Leary. Use the old tunnels. Get her to the other side. And, you? I'm ending this, Darren stepped forward. We are. Together, Virel and Darren climbed to the surface using a hidden shaft. They emerged behind the enemy lines. Snow swirled. Soldiers marched. Drones hovered. But none of them expected what came next. Virel stepped into the open, weapon raised, cloak flying behind her like wings. You call yourselves warriors, you serve cowards. The soldiers turned, hesitated. Some recognized her, others froze, and that moment was enough. Darren tossed a thermal detonator. The command ship exploded. Fire filled the air. Confusion broke ranks, and Virel moved like a storm, slashing, dodging, striking. She was no longer a fallen princess. She was a queen in exile, reclaiming her power. By dawn, it was over. The soldiers who survived fled into the skies. The rest lay silent beneath blood-stained snow. Virel stood among the wreckage, shoulders heaving. Darren limped to her side, a fresh cut on his brow. You're insane, he said. You followed me. He grinned. I'm insane too. Far away, deep in a cave, Sale carried Leary to safety. The child looked back, eyes wide, the rising sun behind her. Will I ever see them again? Sale looked down at her. Your mother is fire, and the human. He's the mountain. If anyone survives this world, it's them. 2 weeks later, Darren and Virel sat beside a quiet fire, high in a new mountain pass. Leary slept peacefully beside them. They had found a new place, a new beginning. No titles, no servants, no crowns, just warmth, family, freedom. Virel leaned against Darren's shoulder. You never asked me what I meant that first night, she whispered, when I said I wanted warmth. He smiled, eyes half closed. I think I understand now. She looked up at him. And? He kissed her gently. That warmth, he said, I'll give you for the rest of my life.